Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We'll be starting just in a minute, Bidnillahi ta'ala. Just give people a chance to join us. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa sallim tasliman kathira. Allahumma faqihna fi din wa alimna ta'wil wa alhimna bifaydi fadlika rushdana ya Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah, in our lessons on Imam Ibrahim al-Halabi's Multaqa al-Abhur, we're covering the section on the fiqh of transactions, fiqh al-mu'amalat, and we have reached lesson number 9, which covers two topics: cancellation, iqala, and the trust sales. Babul iqala and babul murabaha wa tawliya. And both of these highlight some very important principles as well as the fiqh. The first of these, namely Babul Iqala, the chapter on cancellation, highlights an important Islamic virtue, which is that one have consideration for the other party. We saw in the beginning of the section on transactions that there are three governing virtues that should color our financial transactions, which are as-sidq wal-amana, being true in word, trustworthy in commitment, and an-nush, being true and trustworthy are obligations. Nasiha is a recommended sunnah. It's a recommended sunnah. But these three, if found together, one is true, one is trustworthy, and one fulfills commitments, this blesses one's transactions. This blesses one's transactions and places light and goodness in them. And from that is iqala, cancellation. So that's one of the things that we'll look at today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So we'll look at understanding the rulings of cancellation of a sale, how it's legally considered, and when it is allowed. Learning the definitions of the different types of trust sales, at cost, at profit, at loss, and the conditions for their validity. And we'll learn about cancellation, iqala, murabaha, tawliya, wadi'a, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So these are things that one should be clear about. Now, iqala is a matter of significant merit. We see in the words of our beloved Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam that he says in the hadith that is related by Abu Dawood and Ibn Majah and others, that the beloved Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man aqala nadiman." Often, there's come in different ways. In the narration in Abu Dawood is "Man aqala musliman, aqala Allahu athratahu yawm al-qiyamah." Whoever accepts to cancel a fellow Muslim's transaction, Allah will cancel their errors on the day of resurrection. Whoever cancels, i.e., whoever accepts to cancel, man aqala musliman, and aqala is from cancellation. There's a transaction, the person regretted it, and they want to go back on it. Whoever cancels the transactions of a fellow Muslim, and the ulama explain that in these kinds of hadith, Muslim is mentioned as what kind of clause, Sadati? Incidental. It's a qaid ittifaqi. It applies to everyone, but, it's like, the Prime Minister of our country says, you have to be respectful of your fellow citizens. Does it mean that non-citizens you have to be disrespectful towards? No, right? Because this is whom you'd normally be dealing with, right? And this is part of Arabic usage. You have two types of qaid conditions. Qaid ihtirazi, an exclusionary condition, and a qaid ittifaqi, a condition that is incidental. Okay. Because Allah will cancel for them their atharat. And athra is one's slip-ups, which includes sins, mistakes, errors, shortcomings on the day of resurrection. So, this and other hadiths highlight the recommendedness of cancellation. But cancellation is based on mutual agreement, right? Because the sale's taken place. So once the sale is taken place, can one party impose cancellation on the other? No. Yeah. إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم, except that it be trade through mutual agreement. Unless one had specified خيار الشرط, the option of cancellation. This is in the absence of the option of cancellation. And there's a number of other narrations. Imam al-Mundhiri, in his work, At-Targhib wa Tarhib, has a section on At-Targhib fi Iqalat al-Bay'. And see that Abdul Latif will share that over here. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And do remind me of this and anything else that is pending as well. So, al-iqala. So this is of the virtues of it. And it indicates concern for the other party. Someone purchased something. So let's say I went and purchased, my shoes, my feet got much wider recently. Been walking a lot more. So I thought that the black shoes I got were too tight. I actually wore them today, they're not too tight. So if I purchase another pair of shoes, let's say, I don't need them anymore. So I go back. Does the seller have to accept the cancellation? Is it blameworthy? No, it's not. They don't have to. Number two, if they don't accept the cancellation, are they doing anything blameworthy? It's within their rights. And an important thing is if someone does something that's within their rights, as a believer, you have no right to voice your objection publicly. So let's say Uncle Latif started Latif Bakeries and he hired Ali, Fatima, and Hussein because he liked their names. They're all names of mothers of Ahl al-Bayt. So he hired all three on a temporary contract, 60 days. Before the temporary contract's over, he notifies them, I will not be renewing. Can they now go and say, look, don't work with Uncle Latif because he let us go? Would that be permissible? No. Because a person acting within their right has not done you any wrong. So one has to be very careful of these kinds of things. Right? And we are very often influenced by many external things, not just in the West, but in Muslim countries too, right? A lot of Muslim countries have been affected by certain types of socialist thought that, okay, if someone's hired, they have to be hired for life. Now, that's not the case. There should be consideration and loyalty and all these things, but at the same time, so it's a sensitive matter that we need to take into consideration. But there's virtue in canceling. Why? Because a person may enter into a transaction and then regret it. That's why in some narrations in Bayhaqi and others, it says, Man aqala nadiman athratahu. Whoever agrees to cancel, Man aqala nadiman bay'atahu. Whoever accepts to cancel the transaction of one who regrets it, Allah will cancel their errors on the day of resurrection. So that's a little bit of the background and virtues. And it returns to this idea of nasiha. There's a few items of the Majalla. I won't read them out, but you can see them here. Items 190, 191, 192. And the ones after, they highlight the principles related to iqala. There is, and the remaining 193, 194, etc. They highlight some associated principles. I think it's to 196 or 197. So you can see those. Now, Babul Iqala. Iqala in the Arabic language is from lifting something. Right? So there was something that was there and you lifted it. Right? So like in English we say cancellation. So this led to an important difference of opinion between the Imam and Abu Hanifa on what does a cancellation entail. Right? Because when, let's say, I purchased this pair of black shoes from Fatima Shoes, and I go to cancel the transaction. That cancellation, does it not look like a new sale? In one sense, I give the pair of shoes, they give me the price back. Does that not look like a new sale? Outwardly, yes. So is it a new sale or is it a cancellation, which is to lift the previous sale? So their difference of opinion arose between Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. And the difference of opinion gets complicated in form, but it looks like the following. Iqala, it can be summarized as following. Right? 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 That you can take the whole thing, right? We'll see this in the text, but with respect to the transacting party, in respect to a third party, it's considered like a new sale by agreement, right? But that's number one. Before possession is taken, they agreed it's a cancellation. Right? Right? It's a cancellation. After taking possession, so before taking possession, it's, I purchased this scarf. Right? I think I'd lent it to one of my kids. They gave it back to me today. I think 3 years later. Said they didn't know what it was doing in their closet. Anyways, so let's say I purchased a scarf before taking possession of it. So I said, I want to buy that scarf and they say it's $110. Say I accept. So now before I took it, if I say, okay, can I cancel that transaction? I'm sorry. Before taking possession, everyone agrees it's a cancellation. But after taking possession, بعد القبض, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, the iqala is only a cancellation. Why? Because meanings are of consideration, right? Can you transact? Like if someone says, can I cancel the purchase? Can I cancel the purchase of this phone for $1,000? Can you initiate a sale with that? No, because it's meaningless, right? You cannot initiate the sale by using the term cancellation because it's not used in that way in the Arabic language. أقلني هذا أقلني هذا الشراء. Well, there's not been anything to cancel. So Abu Hanifa said that cancellation, iqala, can only be a fasakh, a cancellation, an annulment of the contract. If it's no longer possible to cancel it with the word iqala, with the word cancellation, it does not count. It's not valid. And we'll see when you can no longer do it. According to Athani, who is Athani? Imam Abu Yusuf, he said, practically it counts like a sale. If it cannot be considered a sale, it's considered a cancellation. And if it can neither be considered a sale nor a cancellation, it would be invalidated. Imam Muhammad sort of initially follows the Imam that an iqala, a cancellation, counts as an annulment of the contract. If you cannot consider an annulment, he said, then you can consider it a sale. If you cannot consider it a sale even, then it's invalid. And this has applications in scenarios that we'll see further ahead. Why? Because a transaction took place. They're trying to validate the actions of others. Now, this is all if they use the word cancellation. If they use other words, for example, if you go back, and the scarf, I purchased the scarf, And I said, I didn't say the word iqala, but I said, I don't want this anymore. They said, sure. And they paid $100. But I gave a ziyada muttasila. I embroidered this with, with paisley patterns on it or something, right? Using silk. That's considered a ziyada muttasila. I've added to the item. So it's not legally returnable. So there it's very simple. You say, I don't want this anymore. And the person says, okay, I'll give you back your money. Did we use the term cancellation? Did we use the term cancellation, Sadati? No. So therefore, it can be considered what? It can be considered a sale. Simple. Like it's as if it's a new sale and the issue is solved. But then, if people use the term cancellation widely in these other scenarios, there's leeway to take the position of Abu Yusuf or of Imam Muhammad. Why? Because we consider there are three principal ways when the position of Imam Abu Hanifa may be left. And what are they? Right? Imam Abu Nujaym says, الأصل أنه لا يعدل عن قول الإمام إلا لثلاث لضعف دليل. Either if the evidence is weaker, right? So i.e. the evidence for the position of another mujtahid like Abu Yusuf or Muhammad is stronger. But weighing the evidence of a mujtahid is restricted to someone at a level of ijtihad within the madhab. Or لضرورة, or due to strong need. Taking the position of Abu Hanifa would impose hardship, difficulty, whatever. So one may take another position due to strong need. And by darura, they don't mean necessity, but rather established, clear need. And the third is ta'amulin بخلافه. If the custom, the market custom is it is in accordance with the position of one of the sahibain, for example, practically. So this is the theoretical framework, but let's go to the beginning of the section and see what they have to tell us. Rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhim. فقال الإمام Ibrahim al-Halabi rahimahullah, باب الإقالة, the chapter on cancellation. تصح أي الإقالة بلفظين أحدهما مستقبل خلافا لمحمد. Cancellation is valid with two expressions, an offer and acceptance. Right? أحدهما مستقبل أي ولو كان أحدهما يعني بالمستقبل, even if one of them is ascribed to the future. خلافا لمحمد. Because Imam Muhammad considered it like a sale, they have to be definitive statements. Right? Because the cancellation, right, you may want to cancel it and then you have to bring the thing back, etc. So it's allowed with, if one of the terms is into the future. Okay, I'll cancel it for you. I will cancel it for you, right? وتتوقف على القبول في المجلس كالبيع, and it's dependent on the acceptance in the majlis, i.e. the majlis of the ijab, of the offer of cancellation in the same majlis, like a sale. Okay. وهي بيع جديد في حق غير العاقدين إجماعا. It's a new sale with respect to other than the two transacting parties, by agreement. By agreement, What do they mean by agreement in our books? By ijma', by consensus, even tighter than that. Right? Sometimes it means by this agreement of our scholars, but very often ijma'an is referring to the agreement of Abu Hanifa and the Sahibain. Like in the context of a matan, for example, they'll be talking about the agreement of the founding imams of the madhab, who are three: Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, and Muhammad. So with respect to third parties, this would have implications in things like the right of preemption, for example. Shufa. Or with respect to istibra' of the jariyah, etc. But then the significant thing is that وفي حقهما, and with respect to the two transacting parties, بعد القبض فسخ. This is according to Imam Abu Hanifa. For the two transacting parties, after taking possession, it is still considered a cancellation. A cancellation of the contract, according to Imam Abu Hanifa. Because that's what the word indicates. And there's a good discussion here in Majma' al-Anhur, right? Which is that the basis of speech is that it's taken to be literal, haqiqi. Number one. Number two, a word cannot by default be used to indicate its opposite. Right? So can you, for example, can someone pronounce divorce by saying, I marry you? I said, but I intended divorce. Because marriage and divorce have opposite meanings. Or can you conduct a marriage by saying, I divorce you? No. Because you cannot use a word that is used literally to mean its opposite. Because if you could do that, then there would be loss of meaning, and I mean, human dealings would be destroyed. Okay. فإن تعذر جعلها فسخا بطلت. If it's not possible to consider it a cancellation, it is invalidated. The cancellation is not possible. وعن أبي يوسف بيع. And according to Abu Yusuf, it's considered a new sale. Right? Because there's an offer and acceptance, there's an item of sale. So we're calling it cancellation. So it's as if you're saying, so Abu Yusuf's understanding would be, if you go to cancel, what are you doing? As if you're saying, I am canceling this, therefore, let's initiate a new sale. It's like it's a return sale. Right? So there's almost like an implicit new sale. Right? So you say, أقلني هذا البيع, says أقلتك. Right? It's as if you've implicitly said, أقلني هذا البيع بأن أبيعه لك. Let me cancel this trade, this sale by me selling it back to you. The person says, I accept, i.e., I accept to buy it back from you. So he considered it to be a sale. If not possible, then it's considered an annulment. And if you can neither consider it a sale or an annulment, it is cancelled. And this would normally be when there is a ziyada muttasila, which is where, the item had an inseparable addition to it, because that resembles riba. Right? That if you want to cancel the sale of a piece of cloth, of an item, of cloth, but you'd already stitched it into a thobe. So it has a meaning of riba in it. So that's an Abi Yusuf. وعند Abi Yusuf. وعند Muhammad فسخ. And according to Imam Muhammad, it is a annulment, فسخ. فإن تعذر فبيع. And if not possible to consider an annulment, then it's a sale. And if not possible to consider a sale, then it is invalid. And each has their usul related to this. You can see some details. There's an important point here given in Majma' al-Anhur that this is, in Imam Haskafi's commentary where it says, فَإِن تَعَذَّرَ بَطَلَتْ. He says that this is all if we use the term iqala, we use the term cancellation. If we use the term, take it back, I don't want this anymore, whatever, it would be valid. And we'd consider the custom of the land with respect to what is meant by particular expressions as well. وَقَبْلَ الْقَبْضِ فَسْخٌ فِي النَّقْلِيِّ وَغَيْرِهِ. But before taking possession, it's an annulment in both transferable items, commodities, and other than them, like property. وعند أبي يوسف في العقار بيع. And Abu Yusuf said that when it comes to property, عقار, it's considered a sale. And these have implications. We don't have to worry too much about it. So we went through this diagram, right? And this can help you remember the principles. The most important principle to remember is Imam Abu Hanifa considered to be a fasakh. The position of the Sahibain give leeway where fasakh itself is no longer possible. When there is an addition to the item, for example, right? So in that case, for example, Imam Muhammad's position would then be to consider like a new sale. So this is useful, inshallah, and this is available in the PDF of the slides that we add with each lesson. Okay, and the reason for the difference of opinion can be found in the commentaries that give the legal reasoning. We summarize this for you in the explanation, but you can see it in the ikhtiyar is done very clearly. The position of Imam Muhammad, Abu Yusuf, Imam Abu Hanifa, his response to that. So we've explained that, but the cancellation, according to Abu Hanifa, what is it? It's a lifting of the original contract. So it takes place on the terms of the original contract. So he tells us, فلو شرط فيها أكثر من الثمن الأول أو خلاف الجنس بطل الشرط ولزم الثمن الأول. So if one goes to and cancels the contract, right? So I purchased this scarf for $50. And some people said, you mentioned high prices for items. I'm living in Canada. The exchange rate is about 1.4 between US dollar and Canadian dollar, at least right now, roughly. So if it sounds expensive, remember I'm in Canada. Okay. Tawakkalna ala Allah. So what happens? If one makes a condition that we will cancel for more than the original price, or for something different. The condition is not valid and the original price is due. I want to cancel this contract. So I agree. Cancellation means to lift the contract. The person says, I accept the cancellation for $80. That doesn't work. Right? And then there's also a moral aspect to this, which is if you want the reward of being the facilitative party, then the recourse you have is to stick to this. And it also safeguards rights, because usually who wants to cancel the contract? Usually the buyer or the seller? Sadati, who usually wants to buy? Who usually wants to cancel a contract? Okay, yes. The buyer is usually the one who wants to cancel the contract. Usually, not always. It could be the seller. They realize, oh my goodness, I had promised this to a friend of mine. Right? For example. So that would cause a problem. So there's a possibility for the buyer there to try to harm the seller, the ba'i', to harm the other party. Say, okay, I'll take it back, but for 20% off. And then there's almost a resemblance of riba, right? There's a resemblance of riba as well, right? Because in the end, the seller made $20 without anything changing, because the item is returned as is. The way around is just to make a new transaction. But if they do it as a cancellation, you cannot raise or reduce the price. وعندهما يصح الشرط لو بعد القبض. But according to the Sahibain, the condition is valid if it's after taking possession. وتجعل بيعا, and it would be made into a sale, which is what Abu Yusuf considers a cancellation anyways, and Imam Muhammad originally considers it a cancellation, an annulment. If not possible to be an annulment, Imam Muhammad considers it to be a sale. But they would consider this adjusting of the price to be valid. And one of the considerations that the Sahibain had was to try to facilitate people's transactions in this. But the principle of Abu Hanifa is closer to caution in general, typically, and careful in the core protection of rights. وإن شرط أقل من غير تعيب لزم الأول أيضا. And if they can demand, the condition was for less than the original price, unless the item was blemished, it had a defect, the original price is due as well, according to Imam Abu Hanifa. وعند أبو يوسف تجعل بيعا. According to Abu Yusuf, it's considered a sale. ويصح الشرط, and the condition is valid. Following what does Abu Yusuf consider in all these cases? What does he consider the iqala to be? He's considered to be a bay'. So it's a lot more practical. But it doesn't preserve one party's rights quite as well. And in principle, the meaning of cancellation is simply to lift the original contract. A plus B took place, right? Sale of this item for this price. So you put it in brackets. I want to cancel this transaction. This transaction is this item of sale for this price. Right? So Abu Hanifa is being very cautious. Their positions are more practical in a sense. وَإِن تَعَيَّبَ صَحَّ الشَّرْطُ اتِّفَاقًا. But if the item was blemished, then the condition of reducing the price is valid by agreement. Okay. So this could be diagrammed as well. Price change of this cancellation. And the only time, according to Abu Hanifa, could you change the price in a cancellation is if there was a defect that arose. This. Okay, Bismillah. So that, inshallah, should make it a little bit, should give some clarity, inshallah. Things like this, even ideally for student knowledge, in preparation, one should diagram these kinds of things oneself, and you will find that it helps you understand. There are things that prevent cancellation. Some are obvious, and some require a little bit of consideration. ولا تصح بعد ولادة المبيعة خلافا لهما. Cancellation is not valid after the item of sale gives birth. According to Abu Hanifa, because how can you cancel it? What happens to that addition? So you bought you purchased a cow. Now you want to now the seller wants to cancel the transaction. Right? How can you cancel it? Because there's now a child involved, and how, if you accept taking it back, it has the meaning of riba. Right? And if the other person takes it, it also has the meaning of riba. So the only solution practically is that it's not valid. So this is according to Abu Hanifa, because Abu Hanifa considers a cancellation to only be what? It's only considered what? The iqala is only a Sadati? It's only considered to be a fasakh, according to Abu Hanifa. It's only a cancellation. So how can he cancel it if now there's this ziyada involved? But according to Sahibain, you can consider it. Why? Because what do they consider it? It'll be considered a new sale. But if you want to be cautious, what would you do? If you wanted to be cautious, all you need to do is to turn into a sale. Where you say, I want to give this back. I want to give this back. Okay, can you buy this back from me? I don't want it anymore. And if they agree, that would be valid. And part of that also is that the Sharia looks at, there's a sanctity to words. That even though meanings count, but the vessels of meaning are words. If you break the link between words and meanings, then human life is ruined in dunya and in deen. Because then there's no way you can then interpret primary texts, but so soundly and understand them, nor can you enforce worldly, because all human transactions are based on communication. Communication is primarily verbal. And verbal communication is based on a connection between words, spoken or written, or understood, right? We use indications, but they are convey meanings. If you break the connection between words and meanings, dunya and deen are ruined. Right? So it's وَلَا يَمْنَعُهَا هَلَاكُ الثَّمَنِ. If the price is ruined, it does not prevent the validity of cancellation. Why? Because the price is simply the means of the transaction. بَلْ هَلَاكُ الْمَبِيعِ. But if the item of sale perishes, then the subject of the transaction is gone. So can you cancel the transaction if the subject of the transaction is gone? No. So it's invalidated. Right? I sold my cow to brother Abdullah Muhammad for $1,000. He comes to me and said, I want to cancel this sale. I said, I agree, but the cow's dead. There's no longer the subject of the sale in place. It's obviously invalidated. وَهَلَاكُ بَعْضِهِ يَمْنَعُ بِقَدْرِهِ. But if some of it perishes, then you can only cancel what remains. 12 watermelons, you can cancel the extent of what is remaining. So that's cancellation. So it's pretty straightforward. There are some principles involved. You can learn them. And there are derivative cases which come up. And there's the moral encouragement to accept cancellation. Next is something that used to be quite common. And these are called trust sales, buyu'ul amana, because the buyer is trusting the seller with respect to the original price. And this would be used because, let's say, you're new to an industry, whether because you're new to that country, to that land, or you're just new in trading. You want to get a good deal or a fair deal. So you would want to know. So one of the ways that the seller would incentivize the sale would be to say, look, I'm giving you a good deal. Right? I'm selling it to you at par. I got it for $100. I'm selling it to you for $100. But it's only considered from these sales if this is made part of the condition of the sale, right? So you say, I بعتك يعني هذا الشال $50 على أني اشتريته بذلك. I sell you the shawl for $50 on condition that that's what I purchased it for. So that would make it a trust sale. So the trust sale, the original price, and we'll see, or, the standing price of the item, and we'll see what that refers to. There's some things you can add to the price. That is what I am selling it to you for. At par or for specified profits. Yes, I'm making money from you, so I'm selling you the shawl for $60. With the understanding that I purchased it for $50. So I'm making some money from you, but I'm making a fair profit from you. Or it could be discounted, where it's okay, I'm selling it to you for $40. on condition that I got it for $50. I.e., so you're getting a good deal. This kind of discussion in the negotiation, what's the negotiation called in Arabic? Yeah, musawama, is of no consideration. And this is one of the important things in trade. You can talk a lot of stuff, but anything that you really want in the transaction, you should specify in the sale. And that's where people go wrong very frequently, especially in dealing with family, with friends. Sometimes we have too much trust. And the ulama say that have husn al-dhan inwardly, but transact with su' al-dhan. But what they mean by su' al-dhan is transact with caution. So inwardly have a good opinion of others, but outwardly act with caution so that you can maintain the good opinion of people. Right? And there's expressions, for example, in the Arab world, they say things like "Mish rahin nakhtalif," we won't disagree. So firstly, you fall into sin because can you enter into a transaction without agreeing on a price for a sale, for a service someone's providing you? No, it's sinful. It's sinful. Number one. Number two, you are going to differ because your interests are at variance. You, as the one seeking the service, want the minimum price. The one providing the service will want the highest price. That's the whole point of negotiating before a contract is agreed to. So you can, the need and the want can align. So in trust sales, the original price is made a condition in the contract itself. That's a very important point to catch. Okay. باب المرابحة والتولية. So he says, المرابحة بيع ما شراه بما شراء به وزيادة. So an at profit sale, murabaha, is selling what one purchased for what one purchased it for oneself and a specified increase. So say I sell you this white cap from Burda Clothing. Nice guys, by the way. Right? For $30, given that I purchased it for $20. Yeah, I changed caps because this delivery happened. I was waiting for it for a long time. Also from Burda Clothing, by the way. So that is murabaha. والتولية بيعه به بلا زيادة ولا نقص. And tawliya, and an at-cost sale, tawliya, is selling it for what one purchased it for, with neither increase nor diminishment. And all of these specified in the contract. Then he says, وَالْوَضِيعَ, and an at-loss sale, بيعه بأنقص منه. And a wadi'a and an at-loss sale is selling it for less than what one purchased it for. And in all three, making the original price lower than, making the original price stipulated in the contract. Here, the commentators quote from the Durar of Mullah Khusro. And I'll share the definitions. You can find them in both the commentaries that we refer to, Majma' al-Anhur and also in Imam al-Haskafi. In Majma' al-Anhur, the commentator, Shaykh Zada, actually points out that it would have been better for Imam Ibrahim al-Halabi to change the expression in the text to more closely reflect what Mullah Khusro said in the Durar. The Durar is a blessed text. Mullah Khusro was the first teacher at Ayah Sophia. He was commissioned by Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih to teach at Ayah Sophia, and was a great alim, authored this matan called the Ghurar, which is a matan where he basically took the wiqaya and added lots of nuances, and he had a lot of experience with both in fatwa and qada, so he was very familiar with the nuances of things. So it's an enhanced matan. Although I heard from one of the students of Sheikh Mahmoud Effendi, who's one of the leading fuqaha of Turkey, that the Turkish ulama, the Turkish Hanafi fuqaha, they say that Mullah Khusro wrote this very nuanced matan called the Durar, and it's concise, precise, nuanced, and he didn't understand what he wrote. So he wrote a commentary on it called the Durar. And then he didn't understand what he wrote in his commentary. So he tired out other people because they had to write super commentaries on it. That's a bit of hyperbole. It's a great book. And the people after relied upon it significantly. Amongst them, many people, right? The author of Tanwir al-Absar relies on it very deeply in his matan and in his commentary, Minah al-Ghaffar. Al-Haskafi relies upon it so much in Ad-Durr al-Mukhtar, his commentary on Tanwir al-Absar, that Al-Haskafi himself says in his introduction that وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الدُّرَرِ وَالْغُرَرِ فَلَمْ أَعْزُهُ إِلَّا مَا نَدَرْ. That whatever I reference from the Durar or from its matan, the Ghurar, I don't reference it except rarely. So by default, anything unreferenced in the Durr al-Mukhtar of Imam al-Haskafi, by default, where was it taken from? Sidi Abdul Latif? No, he says, whatever is from the Durar and the Ghurar, the commentary and the matan, I don't reference except rarely. So if Imam Haskafi mentions something in his work, Ad-Durr al-Mukhtar, and he doesn't reference it, where is this condition from? What can we assume? That's from the Durar of Mullah Khusro. So if there's something we don't understand in Ad-Durr al-Mukhtar that he didn't reference, where did he get this extra detail from? Or what does he mean by this extra thing that he put in? We go back to the Durar, and the Durar has a whole number of hawashi on it. I'll just mention 5. Maybe 4. The Hashia of Imam al-Shurunbulali, famous as al-Shurunbulaliya. And if you only get one copy of the Durar of Mullah Khusro, get the one with the Hashia of Imam al-Shurunbulali. The old edition is not particularly good in terms of the soundness of the print. But the modern edition just of the Durar is pretty much disastrous. Then there's also the Hashia of Imam al-Khadimi, the commentator on At-Tariqa al-Muhammadiyya. There's also a commentary by a Hashia by Mullah Abdul Halim, who was the Mufti of Damascus. So Shurunbulali, Khadimi, Mullah Abdul Halim. The 4th is the Hashia of Allama Nuh Effendi. Allama Nuh Effendi. Great Hashia and quite sizable. Rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. And there's a few others as well. So, anyways, so the author of the Durar, he adjusted the expression. Right? And Shaykh Zada says the author should have done this too. So we mention it here. Ad-Durar says, بَيْعُ مَا مَلَكَهُ بِمَا قَامَ عَلَيْهِ is to sell what one came into possession of for the price it was, for what it cost you, plus an increase. For what it cost you, because what it cost you is the original cost, plus there's certain things, as we will see, you can add. There's certain things you can add to the original price. And we'll see what those things are. There, if you had to spend on the item, there are some things, basically those that add value to the item, or, i.e., so they would increase its price, or that are customarily added in such sales. So that's why he gave this definition. And the tawliya is defined, يعني بيعه بما قام عليه بدون زيادة, and the wadi'a is the same thing. So that is a superior way of defining it, right? ولا تصح بعد ولادة المبيعة خلافا لهما, and it's not valid after. Sorry, this is an erroneous slide. Sorry. ولا يصح ذلك ما لم يكن الثمن الأول مثليا, and you cannot make one of these sales unless the original price has an equivalent, right? This a mithli, the formal term for it is fungible, right? So fungible is that there's a like of it. So money by nature is fungible, right? $100, this $100 is like this $100. But if the price was, for example, 100 pens, can you get another 100 pens that are of the same model, etc.? Yes. But if I sold you my cow for 2 handwritten manuscripts, right? So the price was the 2 handwritten manuscripts. That's not fungible, right? It's not mithli. It's a unique item. So it has to be on things that are fungible, that have a mithl, that have equivalents in the market. أو في ملك من يريد الشراء, or it's already in the possession of the one who wants to buy it. والربح معلوما, and the profit in the murabaha has to be known. ويجوز, and now this is where that idea of بما قام عليه from the durar is of significance, because you can add certain things to the price. And in general, what can you add to the price? That which increases the value, and that which is customarily added and accepted to be added in the marketplace. So ويجوز أن يضم إلى رأس المال أجر القصارى والصبغ والطراز والفتل والحمل وسوق الغنم والسمسار. Right? So you can add payment for cloth whitening, the qisara. Right? Because you have unbleached cloth, right? Undyed cotton, for example. And you dye the cotton. So people want it more. Or the sabgh, or dyeing it. There's this cool story. There's this poet from Najd who went to Iraq with a whole bunch of khimars, and he sold all of them except the black ones. So he went to a friend of his, and he was a pious guy. He went to his friend who was a very handsome man. And the women, it was known amongst the women that this is a very handsome man. He'd given himself to devotion. He's also known to be a poet. He'd been quite a, noted youth. So he complained. So this handsome Zahid composed these lines of poetry. He says, "O fair maidens of Baghdad, beware, for when you dressed in the black khimar, you tempted the ascetic away from the masjid." So those lines of poetry spread amongst the women. They said, where are these black khimars? So they went to the market and they bought all the black khimars of this guy. So it's a type of viral marketing that was done in the early centuries of Islam. Anyways, sorry for the digression. The sabgh, what tiraz, and embroidering. And because what do these things do? They increase the value of the item. Wal haml, and transporting it. Because taking the item from the warehouse, for example, to the store adds value to it. Right? Because if the seller didn't bring it to the store, didn't transport the item, you bought 10 carpets, then you would have to pay for the transportation. Was simsar, right? And the broker, right? Then who pays for the broker, right? This is if, because there's an agent. The simsar is an agent. And they said, with the agent's fees included. Right? So the agent's fees could be added to the original price. لكن يقول قام علي بكذا. However, one says, its value with me was such and such. لا شريته. But when one does not say, I purchased it for this much. Why? Because if you say, I purchased it on condition that I purchased it for this much, did you purchase it with these extra things added? No. So it would be a lie. Right? So given that its cost for me was such and such. Right? قام علي بكذا. Right? So you say its cost for me was such and such, which is the original cost, plus you can add these things that add to the value, or that are customarily added to the transaction. Now you have to be very careful. This is why it's called buyu'ul amana. I've worked with God-fearing ulama who engaged in trade, and they would refuse. They'd buy books and stuff in wholesale, and they would refuse. They said, Wallahi, I got these books for this much. I said, please don't mention how much you got them for. Let's agree ourselves on a price. Why? Because the interest of the trader, is it to be honest or to lie? The worldly interest of the trader. Sadati? Sorry? I didn't hear that, Sidi.
His worldly interest would be to lie.
Yeah, the worldly interest is to lie. The worldly interest would be to lie. And the faqih is cognizant of how people are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. The human being is created weak. تُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. You love wealth with intense love. And hub is intense like for something, right? That takes you over. So loving intense love is intense like for something, right? And many other texts. So تحبون العاجلة, etc., etc., etc. So these require caution, but these are done. So if done, one has to be very, very careful. ولا يضم نفقته ولا أجر الراعي والطبيب والمعلم وبيت الحفظ. But one cannot add the things that don't add to the value of the item and are not customarily added. So one cannot add what you had to spend on the animal, because you have to on the item, such as storage, right, in our times. Or you have to spend, if you're selling an animal, can Can you include the feed of the animal? No, because does the feed increase in its value? No, it maintains it. Nor the cost of grazing the animal or the doctor if it got sick. وَالْمُعَلِّمْ, or the teacher. Although they differed. The teacher, like a trainer, like if you bought, a shepherd dog, for example, you trained as, you got little cubs for shepherd dogs and you had them trained. That depends. If people add that cost, because that, if it adds value to it, then you could add it. So there's some question marks about the muallim. If it adds value, it would be in وَبَيْتِ الْحِفْظ, and its storage. Because you cannot include these for the reasons mentioned. فإن ظهر للمشتري خيانة في المرابحة خير في أخذه بكل ثمنه أو تركه. If the mushtari, if the buyer discovers deceit, cheating in the at profit sale, he has the choice of either taking it for the whole price or returning it. And this is either if the seller acknowledges it or he's able to establish proof. And if he's able to establish proof, then the buyer has to be truthful and trustworthy there, right? But it's a problem. Like if he cheated, now he has to be truthful after the fact. So the seller has to be able to provide proof, right? Or it has to be taken to court. وفي التولية يحط من ثمنه قدر الخيانة. And in at par sales, at cost sales, the sale price is reduced to the extent of the cheating. وهو القياس في الوضيعة. And this would have been the legal reasoning with respect to at loss sales. Right? And they say هو القياس في الوديعة, because we don't have an explicit narration from Imam Abu Hanifa regarding this, but this is what would be entailed over there. Right? So cheating at profit sales, there's a choice between taking it for the full price or cancellation, returning. In at cost sales, it's reduced by the extent of the cheating. وعند أبي يوسف يحط فيهما قدر الخيانة مع حصتها من الربح في المرابحة. Right? And according to Abu Yusuf, one reduces in both of them, right? Meaning in both the at cost sale and the wadi'ah to the extent of the cheating. وعند محمد يخير فيهما. And according to Muhammad, he has a choice either to, in both of them, right? To take it or to cancel as well, because he was cheated. فلو هلك قبل الرد امتنع الفسخ. But if the item of sale perished before the returning, it's no longer possible to cancel it because the subject of the transaction has gone. وَلَزِمَ كُلُّ الثَّمَنِ اتِّفَاقًا. In this case, the agreed upon price is due by agreement. Though diyanatan, religiously, if the buyer is aware that he cheated the seller, then he should give him back the difference. It would be at least recommended, if not morally required, to do so. So this is the first section of trust sales. We'll look at dealing with the item of sale and price in it and some other principles, and we'll ready ourselves after that for the section on riba. And the section on riba is very important. We're going to be doing a supplementary lesson related to this on the prohibition of riba and its gravity and some of the misconceptions that people have with respect to the Hanafi position of riba in Dar al-Harb. So we'll be doing that as an extra lesson next week, بإذن الله تعالى. وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. There's a question that came up from last class about disliked sales. So the question was, so what about buying things where there's harm involved in the transaction? Right? And the question was with respect to, for example, boycotting companies that have, that have trade relations with the Zionist entity, for example, but it's a wider thing. So in general, you yourself engaging in that which is sinful or dhulm directly is sinful. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Right? That assist one another in righteousness and piety. Do not assist one another in sin nor transgression. So for you to directly, for example, you're supplying arms to the enemy directly is sinful. But life has complications, right? Indirect association with those who are engaged in these kinds of things, there's karaha in it. Where avoidable, the karaha becomes stronger. Where not avoidable, the karaha becomes lesser. That you would be rewarded for avoiding it, but it's not sinful. So, are we allowed to be using operating systems from Microsoft or Apple? Yes, but one should hate it in one's heart. Why? Because both Microsoft and Apple are both engaged in odious practices, just when it comes to the Zionist entity, but also in many other things as well. Right? But am I helping them do that? No. Right? But there's an indirect association. There's a recommendation to avoid an indirect association with sin, an indirect association with wrongdoing. Whether that is the political harming of others, Muslim, or, political harming, the killing, I just be straight up, but also other types of harm. Most of the milk we get, how are the animals kept for that? In very nice, healthy conditions? No. And the animals are kept in the industrial meat, dairy complex, right? They're kept in very bad conditions. Most of the halal meat we get, are the cows, the poultry, the chickens, how are they kept? There's dhulm on the animals, whether in dairy production, milk and cheeses, etc., or in meat production. Does that make it haram for you to eat that meat or drink that milk? No. But to the extent that you can avoid, but there's karaha, there is dislikedness. To the extent that you can readily avoid it, you are rewarded for it. So for example, if someone is wealthy and they can just get organic, ethical, they can deal with farmers who don't deal with this, who treat their animals fairly, whether for meat production or for dairy. One is rewarded for that. Number one. Number two, to the extent that someone has ability, the dislikedness would increase. But there isn't an expectation that, because if you were to avoid everything, that there's dhulm indirectly related to, can you practically operate in this dunya? It would be unlivable. That's why the Sharia has ideals, but it has a principled navigation of a messy world. A principled navigation of a messy world. Right? But one must hate it with one's heart. That's at the individual level. What you are able to do, you are recommended to do. And then collectively, we have a fard kifaya. Right? A fard kifaya, a communal obligation to stand up against every sin and every wrong. Right? So, but one should be an aware consumer at that level. That, for example, a lot of people buy clothing from people who, much of this cheap clothing that people get, it's made in horrendous conditions. So one should be careful about where one gets one's things from. Many people buy Islamic clothing made in China, and it's being made by forced prison labor of our fellow Uyghur brethren, for example, etc. Right? So one should be aware, right? And where one can avoid, it makes it more tayyib, and one is rewarded for this, particularly when one has ability. And we've covered some of this in our revival circle when we covered the principles of halal and haram. So Abdul Latif, you can share that link. We can find where we covered it in the principles of halal and haram, and we can share that as well. There's a question. Go ahead, please.
You mentioned about regarding the meat of animals that have been tortured and so on. Basically, I'm from Mauritius, and when I was in England, it wasn't that much horrendous. But when you consider the way Muslim take the animals, the buffaloes and so on, for Qurbani, it is more horrendous. It is more, it causes more harm and torture to the animals. It's like, unfortunately, it's like Chinese start at home. And when so many people say, okay, so and so maybe be wrong to an animal in the milking process and so on. But the same person, when he is doing the Qurbani at his own place, it causes the animal to be traveling in huge trucks.
No, so so that depends on the context. So the general principle is that the Prophet ﷺ said, "La darara wa la dirar." There's no harming, nor reciprocating harm, right? And so we need to be conscious of all these things, right? In some places, there's actually very dignified treatment because there's prophetic encouragement to treat the dhahaya, the udhiyah with dignity, right? And there's a lot of prophetic guidance about how one slaughters the animal with dignity. So we need to be careful. We need to uphold this justice, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes clear, both within our community and in dealing with that which is around us. Both. It's not either or, that we must begin here and then there. No, because people are consuming in both ways. And of course, we also have to, realize that we have to, as at the ummatic level, we have to become economically independent as well, right? We should have operating systems and technology, etc., where we can stand on our 2 feet. Our ummah has been through a lot and is still going through a lot. But, we're realizing, inshallah, more and more that we have to, stand on our own 2 feet as an ummah.